Welcome to the show, Maayan. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me today.
And before we get diving into today's topic, please tell our listeners where you're tuning in from and tell me a bit what you were telling me off air just before.
Yeah, so I'm tuning in from Chicago, Illinois right now, but it is not where I live. We are currently here as part of the Main Street Tour, which is this epic 2-year cross-country adventure. We sold our house in Spokane, Washington, where we lived, bought an RV where I'm in right now. You can see our dining room essentially kind of behind me. And we've been on the road for 9 months now, and every single city that we stop into, we visit a bunch of different small businesses. We help them with their social media. We empower them. We encourage them. And we do other things like in Chicago, we just did a meetup last night where we got, like 40 different people from the community all together, just connected with each other, bonded, and had a really great time.
That is so amazing, so inspiring. It actually gave me goosebumps this time when you were talking about it. I feel that the combination of the variety and travel and the impact and business aspect is just match made in heaven. So amazing, so inspiring. What a great note to start the show with. So we're going to dive straight into today's topic around resilience and emotional resilience. And we were talking a tiny bit off air, and maybe you could reframe it in your words, or I'll just repeat what you just said, but why do you feel the resilience and mental health is so fundamental for everyone and for business owners?
Yeah, so for me personally, how I became really interested in it is twofold. One, I've always been interested in science. So, the human body has fascinated me. It's so complex. It operates so well. We understand so little about, the body. And to me, the most important part of the body is the human brain. And from experience, energy, all the things we talk about from a human experience standpoint, generally all of that functionality comes from our brain. So really interested in that. But then as I was building businesses over, the past decade, a little more than a decade, I really noticed a huge pattern in my ability to produce quality work, volume of work, progress, productiveness was absolutely correlated to not only my energy level, whether, having low energy or high energy, whether you're happy or sad, but also really my ability to deal with my own emotions and process my emotions. And, when something challenging in a day happened, what skills I did or didn't have to be able to, be able to get through that challenge or over that challenge quickly, and then back to my work in a focused manner. Because I think a lot of us have had experience where, we're not feeling too hot. And I don't mean we've got a cold. I mean, we had a fight with our spouse. And it's nagging in the back of our brain. And we go to work and we're doing our work, but no matter how much we try and focus on it, that nagging problem just keeps coming up and, steals our attention, steals our energy, steals our focus. And so as I really started working to optimize my ability to deal with my emotions, my ability to recognize my emotions, my ability to create my emotions, I really noticed a significant impact not only in my business, but I mean, in my experience of life. So I think it's one thing, we all want our businesses to be successful. We all want to be successful at work, but really we just all want to be happy, and happy is not a one ingredient cake that we bake. It's got a lot of different ingredients and steps, and each person has their own recipe for happiness. But for me, and for everyone that I've talked to in the planet and in my lifetime, emotions have been a really important part of that cake for baking our own happiness.
100%. And like you said, what's the point of, having a successful business if we're not happy or enjoying the journey? And yes, I can totally relate to what you were saying in terms of managing our emotions. I mean, one of the areas I work with most is focus. And like you said, we can't be focused if we're not able to manage our distractions. And there's this illusion the distractions are the pings and the notifications, etc. But the real distraction is, when you're feeling bored or unsatisfied or frustrated, then you go and check all that stuff. You're in the flow, you're enjoying it, and you're focused. No distractions can bother you, so they're not external, they're internal. And this is where the emotional resilience is so important. So I'd love to hear what are some of your like 2, 3 key tools that have really helped you to develop this emotional resilience, processing your emotions, and everything you've been speaking about.
Yeah, so I would say number one, time alone by myself. Like that has been the most key ingredient for any type of learning that has to do with me and myself. And I think today we live in a world where it's so easy to not be by yourself and with your own thoughts. And what I mean by that is not just, by myself in a room, but like on my phone. This takes you away from yourself. So that means, going on walks and not bringing my phone and just letting, paying attention to all the thoughts that run through my head. Really paying attention to how I feel, asking myself questions that then I have to tell myself the answers to. So that alone time, I think, is incredible because you can really go kind of deep into yourself from a focus standpoint to start noticing different things that when we're going throughout our day-to-day life, we don't notice because they're deeper than that surface attention layer that we're used to paying attention with from our day-to-day. So that would be number one. Number two, I would say, is probably reading books. Reading my entire life, reading books has been one of the largest contributing factors to success in any area, whether that's communicating effectively, whether that's conflict resolution, whether that's, having some cool strategies for how to come up with the purpose for my business, or, some different exercises and tools for, figuring out what kind of, if I'm an introvert or an extrovert. Like books are filled with so much valuable information. I believe they're the densest information source that we have access to. So you would think a movie might be, or video might be more dense typically than a book. But a book typically has, I think it's like 6 to 20 years worth of knowledge from someone's life, typically, versus a movie will contain, I think it's like 6 to 12 months worth of information. So books are just so dense with how much information that they have in them, continually putting new concepts, new ideas into your head, and then giving yourself time to process them and figure out what do those things mean to me, which of them are relevant, which of them, cool ideas, but that's not for me. So those two things together, I think, are really a recipe for anyone to be able to increase their emotional intelligence, emotional resiliency, and just learn learn a bunch of useful new things.
Yes, and I love what you're saying. Well, everything and books. Yes, I'm going to continue on that in 2 seconds. I think that one key point to begin with is having the will to actually confront those inner thoughts and emotions.
Yes.
Because I was just thinking that alone time or that reading those books on that knowledge, you have to want to see what's going on. And I remember when I went on this silent meditation retreat, a 3-day one, not the 10-day one. I'm aiming to do that one too, but building myself up slowly.
Yeah.
Through 3
Smart.
days. 3 days first. But yeah, the 3-day one, I remember that the beginning, the meditation teacher said that for most people, the hardest is just them being alone with their mind because they've sort of avoided that the whole time. And I found that wasn't that hard for me, but it's because I'm always sort of trying to distance myself from my thoughts, trying to see them, just like you were saying, going for a walk and actually paying attention. But most people don't. So what happens is, all these things build up and then suddenly they're on the side of meditation retreat and it's like, then they have to see all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really great point. I think sometimes as I'm on this journey, I forget, you can forget where you started, which is where everyone mostly starts. But no, that's true. I think most people, or at least many people, are so used to not paying attention to those emotions that one, it's automatic how they're trying to avoid them, because you can't avoid something that's a part of you, right? So like human beings, our brains that give us all of these incredible abilities to create mental, structures. And sometimes those mental structures support us. Sometimes those mental structures really imprison us. And unfortunately, a lot of us, because mental health really is 0% of our educational system, like none of us grow up being taught different skill sets, different concepts around our thoughts and our emotions for the most part, that a lot of people are trapped in a prison of their own making, that they don't even know how or why or when they built it. And that adds an extra layer of, not only are these things popping up now, but like some mechanism in my head is doing something to them that I don't feel in control of. And I think for me, why I feel so comfortable looking at and interested and wanting to look at those thoughts and look at those parts of me is because I feel very, very in control of them. And that creates a sense of safety. But, with talking with people like because I talk with a lot of people about, where they're at with their, mental health or emotional journey. And a lot of people really don't feel like they understand or have control of what's going on in here or in here. And that makes it scary. That makes it confusing. It makes it frustrating for a lot of people. And so I think it's both of those layers of, not only do I maybe not want to deal with like these thoughts and emotions, but I don't even have control over a mechanism to do that. And so I think, those meditations are great. I actually know people who've done the 10-day one from like no real practice of meditation, but because they were having like life trauma that was really severe, and someone was like, you got to go to this meditation, like you just go do it for me. And they're like, all right. And then afterwards, like, it's completely changed everything about like their ability to function in life, because I think it forces you to push through that, barrier of, this is uncomfortable, I don't feel in control, so I'm gonna walk away or give up from it, to, I have to sit here. And then the cool thing is, when you exert that willpower over yourself, over the initial tendencies that you built, you actually have control to make yourself do anything. And so once you realize that, that's the real, key, that's the real secret that unlocks all the other secrets, is really believing fully throughout your body, throughout your mind, that you can do something. If you believe that, you will do it. Like, you will accomplish it. You'll figure out a way. It's really, can you get yourself not 99%? Can you get yourself full 100? That last 1% is the most important percent to our ability to take control of our thoughts and our emotions.
Yeah, that was really deep. And I think one of the things that helped me most in general, you talk about this sort of fear of confronting our thoughts and emotions, and people not knowing how to do it and feeling they're not fully in control of it. I think a great part of it is knowing that they're all temporal. So, you can have this fear thought, but after a while it goes away, maybe because you've practiced it or you've trained it. Or you can have this anxiety emotion, after a while it goes away. So knowing that things will pass, and knowing that that's not us. So I feel that when people don't really understand this, they feel that their thoughts are them, and then it gets very messy because our thoughts are contradictory. So if you think it's you, and one thought is saying go fit, and the other one saying I'm scared, I don't want to go fit, who do you listen to? It's scary. So I feel that's where the meditation really helps, because you just sort of come above and you see both. You think the one that goes for it, wants to go for it, is my core desire. The one that doesn't want to, okay, amygdala speaking, fear driven, okay, intuition, okay, I will go for it, or not, depending on the situation. But being able to rise, see the different thoughts, understand them, and then think maybe you don't want to listen to any of them, but you need to rise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you brought that up, because that terminology and that way of thinking about rising above actually feeds into a neurological reason why some people have a hard time dealing with their emotions, or their thoughts, anything mental, is because our mental processes rely heavily, and our brain relies heavily on our visualization system. So, mostly everything we see is not because we're receiving light signals, and our brain is processing all the light from things we see right now, and that's what we're seeing. What's actually happening in our brain is it has data from our entire life about what things look like. And so it's running a constant simulation in our head that it is correcting with the visual input from our eyes. And the reason for that is because what we're seeing is composed of much more data than what our brain can process in the moment visually. So what I mean in more like concrete example is our eyes can see or take in light-wise the equivalent of, let's say, the state or the country of France. So the number of people who live in France, each one of those people is a little bit of information that our eyes can process and take in. Our brain can only process 8 of those people and allow us to see 8 of the people out of all of the country of France, right? And so instead of it doing that every single second, it's built a movie and image of what things are supposed to look like. And then it says, okay, what you're seeing is actually a little bit different. And then it tweaks it and changes it. And so why all of this is relevant is because understanding how your brain is functioning can help you understand what's happening in here. Because I remember before I started learning about the neuroscience of it, I would get thoughts and kind of like you're saying, I'd be like, I don't know what's going on in here. What does this mean? Like, why do I have one voice that says this thing? Why do I have another voice that like really wants this thing? Like, what does all of this mean? And why is it happening? What does it mean about me more than what does it mean, right? Like, what do these mechanisms say about me? Is there something wrong with me? Is this normal? Like, how would I even ask or communicate about these things? Because like even trying to talk about it makes me feel like I'm crazy or sound like I'm crazy. So it's a challenging, I think, thing to navigate. But to your point, being able to just really rise above, that's a visual thing, to be able to look at 2 different objects. It's not just a metaphor. Our brain, our mental capacity does that. And so unlocking that capability comes from understanding how it works. And that's what I've realized about the brain in every area. When you understand how it functions, you unlock the mental capacity to do it. And so, you know, a great example in meditation, right? And I forget all the different types, the names of the meditations. But the one where you're noticing thoughts and kind of paying attention to them, what that allows you to do, to your point, is realize that you are not the thoughts, that there's a space in time between the thought and you. There's this little space of time, and that's kind of how this form of meditation gets you to disconnect mentally from that happening. And once you can do that, then you go, okay, so who am I? What am I in control of if I'm not the thoughts, which I don't feel in control of right now? And you start realizing there's this really cool visual system inside of your head, right? We've all visualized before for the most part. We do it automatically. So when you talk about a red apple, my brain will create a flash internal image of a red apple. And once you start paying attention to those things, they become more clear, kind of like the red car syndrome, right? Like as soon as you own a red car, you see the red cars everywhere. And the same thing is happening with like your mental concepts in your brain is once you notice it, you start noticing it more and more. And once you start noticing it more, then you start feeling more in control for whatever reason. That ability to notice and observe gives us a sense of control that's really valuable.
And it was such an interesting point what you said about understanding the brain helps us to process, because I know the reading about, you know, just the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. For those who don't know, the amygdala is the sort of fear, old part of our brain, and the PFC, prefrontal cortex, is the reasonable, you know, rational side of things. But just reading about that and understanding that sudden fear, that sudden sense of paranoia was just that old part of my brain that's just biologically meant to do that. But I don't have to listen to that fear, because it's sometimes you do, but sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes it just kicks in because it's a new situation or it's a different circumstance, but it's not actually something that's scary. Then you can just, yeah, I don't know. In my case, in those moments when I realize it, I literally think, okay, amygdala got the message. And then I say like, calling PFC, and just doing that kind of makes me smile, and then it makes me calm down, and then I breathe, and then I do somehow obviously activate my prefrontal cortex. I mean, I guess the meditation also helps. So yes, understanding the brain and how it works, I think is tremendously useful. Yes.
Yeah, I would say the other thing, so part of why how that's working for you is when you're meditating, you're creating new circumstances for yourself, for your brain to pull on. So all of our present, especially our emotional experience, happens completely because of our past experiences. So and this makes a lot of sense for, you know, really anyone who notices any particular emotional, we say emotional response, but all our emotions are created by our brain. They're not triggered. And then our brain is not responding with emotion. It's actually creating emotion to help us process our physical sensations. So if, you didn't, if we went through life without emotions, we would feel something, and then every time we felt something, we'd have to figure out what it meant or like why we felt that way. And that would require our brain to use a lot more energy. And so when you're meditating, when you're deciding to change your behavior, what you're doing is you're inputting new data essentially into your big bin of data that your brain is drawing from to create your now experience. And so when you're meditating, you're adding calm experiences to all your life experiences. And so when you're thinking about it, especially when you're like, ooh, meditation, your brain goes, now we're going to heavily more favor the thing you just mentally referenced. And it automatically is creating a sense of calm. So you're not actually responding to something in the external environment. You're responding to your internal environment, which is all of your life experience that your brain has, stored and access to.
I never thought of it that way. I never thought of it that we're just able to produce more calmness because we've experienced it more.
Yes. Oh, you just said it greatly. Yes. If we want to change our future experience, all we have to do is change our experience right now, and it will automatically happen. Like we can make ourselves feel like we're putting in effort, but even if we didn't create that feeling of effort, it would still happen. And we'd be like, wow, how did that happen?
Yes, that's so interesting. I'm still thinking it through, because the way I looked at it was, using what Tony Robbins talks about a lot, which is that we mostly have these sort of 10 emotions that we go over and over. So we have these patterns. So what I would often think is when an emotion came up that I hadn't had in a long time, or some form of stress or upsetness, I think, oh, this is an emotion I used to have for a long time. My brain was kind of used to it. Maybe it's seeking comfort, and it used to be a regular emotion, so it's coming back. So I thought of it that way, which I think is linked to what you're saying, but I never thought that if you want more of an emotion, which is obvious, right? If you want more of something, just do it more. But I never thought of it with meditation. I always just thought you got calmer because your thoughts slowed down, and also do stuff to your brain, etc., etc. But it's also because you're calmer, then it's easier to be calmer. I don't know.
It's both.
It
No,
sounds
it's for
weird.
sure. It's, the human system's super complex, right? And when I say complex, I don't mean complicated. That's why there's two different words. So complex, high complexity from a scientific standpoint means that one system can operate and do many different things. So we don't need a million different systems, right? Like our brain has a bunch of these neural networks, and each network or each set of neurons can do millions of different things, right? With the exact same set of neurons. And so being able to describe exactly what causes anything is usually an answer of this, this, and this. And a lot of our human experience is circular. So what we're talking about, why it feels confusing and not intuitive, is because, as we're saying, so to create more calm in the future, you have to do more calm now, but to be more calm now, you have to have calm that you're accessing from other things. So it's like kind of like this chicken and egg scenario when it comes to our brain. But we always have the ability to change our future based off the things that we do right now. And that's because, so in the scenario you described about like the 10 emotions and this one emotion that hadn't come up in a while. So it wasn't that your brain was trying to find comfort or anything. This is a really good example. What happened is that, and this is how all of our emotions are created by our brain, is we've been through, millions of experiences in our lifetime. And that's like the raw data that our brain is running constant statistical analysis on. So our brain is a prediction machine. That is, its base function is to predict what's about to happen and then prepare our body for it. And that's why we live in that simulation, right? So it's constantly running all these predictions. So your brain was running, millions of simultaneous predictions. And out of your past experience, it said, this feeling that you felt before, I think is the closest match to explain what you're going through right now, where we're going to have to use as least amount of energy as possible. I say we, where I, the brain, I'm speaking in the brain's voice, has to use the least amount of energy. So that's always a thing to remember with your brain, is it weighs 2% of your body, takes up 20% of your daily energy consumption. And that's with you having like kind of a normal day. Any thought intensive tasks can cost you an extra 100 calories an hour. Just from you be sitting still, thinking about a hard math problem for an hour, you'll burn an extra 100 calories just from the mental effort. So our brain has this massive job of processing everything we experience, of communicating everything that happens with our body. It runs everything, right? Our body's so complex. The world we live in is so complex. It's got a really, really big job. So its number one priority always is conserve energy to keep you alive. Because if you don't have enough energy, you die, right? So our primary function of our brain is to keep us alive, and it does that by conserving energy. So the way that it does that is it is constantly predicting what's going to happen next. So it can allow us to have consciously enough information to make a decision that requires less brain work from us in the future. So that's actually how our entire, social context is built. Like, how did we come up with this idea for money? It's because it saved all of us a whole bunch of energy and made life easier and made our brains have to work less. Why is it that we have family structures, right? Like, they seem like obvious questions, like, well, that's the way life is, but how come we marry, a single partner and have that partner typically, and obviously now there's lots of different, partnership scenarios and relationships, but for most of, human culture, it's been, you find a partner, and, divorce was very frowned upon a couple hundred years ago. It was like a big no-no. Why is that? It's not just because of religion. It's because our brain knew that was going to save us all a whole lot of energy if we could help each other. And if we had, rules that were imaginary, but that we all kind of bought into and didn't have to figure out every time we're in a new scenario, things from scratch. So we create all of these invisible rules to help us navigate the world, not to make the world a better place, unfortunately, not for any other reason other than it saves us energy in navigating life.
Yes, it's true. And I think we often forget it, or very often forget it. And that's why I think a lot of people do struggle with discipline, which is one of the topics I'm passionate about. I'm collaborating with Giovanni Dinsman on mindful self-discipline. I think it's an amazing topic. And I think the reason people struggle so much with is we're deep wired, save energy. So anything that's an effort, anything like just bring out the trash, it's like, oh, this is so hard. It's not.
Yeah. Like, why does it feel so hard to do the smallest thing sometimes, right? It's because we can't escape the default, programming of our brain, which is to save energy. And so we're in a constant battle. This is really the human experience, is we're in a constant battle against our own brain. It's designed to help us survive, and it's designed really, really well. But the world is so complex and changing that the thing that helps us sometimes is the thing that hurts us too. And so if you feel that way in life, guess what? That's the human experience. You're not alone in feeling like all the things that are meant to help you are also somehow hurting you. And that, there's a downside to every upside, right? There's no kind of like things that are as simple as our brain wants them to be. Our brain wants simple, and the world is complex. And so we are stuck in the middle of that, trying to navigate it all.
Yes, our brain wants simple and the world wants complex. And yes, sometimes often the things that are best for us require quite a bit of effort. So it's finding that sort of middle ground and balance. I find it quite interesting that the lights switched off just as we were talking about how hard it is for the brain. I thought that was interesting. It was like the light of the brain.
Yeah, and can
Yes.
you feel how much work your brain's doing to be like, what's happening? How do I solve problems? What do I do now? Because we don't have like, imagine if we had like a cultural etiquette around like when your lights accidentally come off, turn off, like then your brain wouldn't have to do work. It would just know what to do. So that's why we create all these like customs and culture and communities and things like that.
Yes, we've created a lot of things to make our life easier, but yet still all the most important things like exercising, like having healthy relationships, like growing a business, all of these things still require that inner effort and will and willpower. Amazing. We're kind of already out of time, but before we leave, first of all, we never got back to the topic of books. We got so carried away in terms of directions. Love books, love what you said. Yes, content, so many information, and books have totally changed my life. So it's amazing to hear you praise them so highly. And what would be the top 3 books that you would recommend in terms of on these topics around emotional resilience, around managing our thoughts and emotions? What would be your top recommendations?
Yeah, so my number one book that I think everyone should read is by Lisa Feldman Barrett, or Barrett Feldman. I might have misordered those. And it's called How Emotions Are Made. And it goes into really, I've read a lot of books on emotions and mental health. Most of them dance a little bit around kind of that, like that question, what is an emotion? Like, give me a straight answer. What is it? In this book answers it so well, and I think has a really good mixture of very easy to read language with some, scientific technical jargon and terminology, which I think is important. I think people need to learn new words. I think that for me, not just another reason why books are so amazing, learning new words can fundamentally help you change your life, because words don't just describe, we don't just use words to describe our reality, we use words to create our reality. And the book can, give you a better understanding about how that works. So that's number one. Number 2 would be Collective Illusions by Todd. I have it right behind me. Todd Rose. That's really phenomenal for helping you understand culture and society. And like, if you're feeling like, why is the world going like this down the toilet right now, this book will help you fully feel comfortable understanding like why we're where we are at in our culture and society right now. I don't know that it'll make you feel better about it, but at least you'll understand kind of like what's going. I think it's really important for us to understand what forces are enacting on us that create inherent biases in us, right? Like we all love to think that we're impartial, objective judges, but we're all super biased, and that book will help you understand what ways we're all being, impacted and influenced from culture and society. And then number 3, let's see. I'm gonna throw a crazy one in there that you're gonna like. Would be War and Peace. It's a really, really long book, but it's like if someone wrote a novel in poetry. It's like the way that that the language and the syntax and the words that he uses to write in that is just makes life feel so lovely. So I think it's an incredible, it's also a really, really good insight into human psyche. Like he spent a really long time doing incredible research and has natural talent for being able to describe what's going on inside people's heads. And for me, growing up when I was reading books, that's part of how I developed a baseline of higher emotional intelligence, was understanding, oh, these are the thoughts wrote in a third person voice for someone else. Like, these are thoughts people have. They're not my thoughts. I wouldn't naturally have these thoughts, but these are real thoughts that another human in this situation might have. And so I think, War and Peace can give you a really good insight into what might be going on in other people's heads. And you can kind of take little bits and pieces and go, I've experienced that before. Or, oh, I can imagine how these other people, not me, but these other people would feel this way that was just described in this book. So that's my third one.
Amazing. What a great note to finish on, finishing with Tolstoy. I haven't read War and Peace, but I loved Anna Karenina. And yes,
Oh, I
love what
have
you.
that next. That's my
Well,
next
I
one.
loved it. Maybe you'll like it even more.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited. I love reading. It's just it's such a wonderful. And if you look up, I encourage everyone look up like benefits of reading. There's like it'll blow your mind. There's like hundreds, literally hundreds of individual benefits that you get from reading. But especially if you're stressed or you're struggling with mental health or emotions at all, reading is such an we use the word escape, but I feel like there's a better, it's more like a portal than an escape. It's not really about getting away from where you are, it's about going into something new. Or for me, it's always been that way. And obviously those things are tied together, but it can really, really help manage whatever it is that you've got going on in your life.
Amazing. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I feel I could have spoken for hours and hours and hours. Thank you so much, Maayan. I've loved everything that we talked about. So important. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I'll do one last plug for myself. If you're listening right now, I would love to connect with you. Send me a connection request on LinkedIn. That's my favorite main platform that I, do communicating on, and would love to, connect with all of you guys.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yep. Have a great one.